Here's another familiar health concern that a lot of us know about, especially if we have any kind of respiratory condition, and that is ground level ozone. A lot of us think about ozone as being up in the stratosphere, way up high. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ground level ozone right here, right where we are doing our daily activities. And what makes that ozone is our own pollution plus sunlight plus heat. And we all know with climate change, we're getting more days that are hotter than they used to be. So you throw in our own air pollution into that mix, we're going to have more ozone days. There was a study back in 2007 that said that, according to that study, that east of the Mississippi, we're going to have 68% more ozone days than we used to have by 2050. If you want, you can go check out to see if that's been updated, because they do that. Models will project things and they'll change and so forth. So it's good to just stay on top of it and keep up to date. I'm not going to go do that. I'm going to let you do that because I want to talk about what it does to the body. All right. When we have high ozone days, we get what's called sunburned lungs. And what that means is here on the left, you see nice pink, healthy air passageways there. And then on the right, you see they're red and inflamed. And that's from ozone exposure. And we all get that. So if you're out and about on a hot, sunny day and you're in a city where there are lots of cars and there's industrial stuff and your throat starts to itch and you notice you're coughing a little bit and so forth, that could be from the ozone that you're breathing. Anyway, for people who have asthma, this is what ozone does to them. You see a normal airway, but then when there is something in the air that irritates an asthmatic's air passageways, those things get super inflamed, they swell right up, and they can swell to the point that they even close. So this is why ozone is a kind of a big deal for folks with respiratory conditions, especially folks with asthma. Another season we have to watch out for is what I call particulate matter season. Like during the dry season in some areas of the US, it gets super dusty and they get monsoon haboobs. What that means is there will be a storm off in the distance, but because the soil is so dry, that'll kick up a ton of dust into the atmosphere, into the air, and that blows over cities and so forth, and it's a dust storm essentially. And then we have fire season also that we have to watch out for. As climate change is drying out our forests, that's going to increase the intensity of any wildfires that happen. And here you see a picture of New York City when there were fires in Canada. That smoke carried over into New York City and blanketed the city with all that smoke. Air quality was pretty bad. And why is that a big deal? Why is particulate matter such a big deal when it comes to our health? Here's why. Some particulates are so small that when we breathe them into our lungs, they actually cross into our bloodstream. And when that happens, our bodies want to protect us from this foreign body that's floating around in our bloodstream. And it will glob onto that particulate matter, platelets and all kinds of, gunk to try to protect the body from it. That usually gets stuck to this inside wall of a bloodstream, but a blood vessel, I'm sorry. But after a while, that actually can get knocked loose and it can travel through until it reaches a blood vessel that's smaller than it is. And at that point, it becomes a plug. And when it becomes a plug, it can cut off blood supply to wherever that blood vessel was going. If that's a blood vessel that feeds the heart, we can have a heart event. So yeah, just check out the news. It's quite, there's been quite a lot of historical events. There was one in London way back, I think in the 1940s or 50s. I can't remember exactly when. And it, the study showed that people died from that event because they had heart events and so forth. And they're, as asthma attacks, etc. So we just have to be super careful and pay attention to those air quality notices that we get and take good care of ourselves. Again, this is a health problem that we've experienced for decades. Has nothing, climate change isn't causing this, but what climate change is doing is making it happen more often or more intensely than it used to. So that's the difference. The United States Agricultural Research Service completed a study in 2019 which found that since the 1970s, per storm, there's about the same amount of rain that's been falling, but in some cases it's falling in a shorter period of time. So that's a lot of inches happening in a short period of time, which can lead to flooding. And that's another concern that's happening with climate change. With hurricanes, we're very familiar with hurricanes here in the United States. The thing that is happening with climate change is that they're staying stronger further inland than they used to. For example, with Hurricane Helene, it stayed at hurricane strength well into Georgia before it became a tropical storm. And that's the one, if you don't remember, that's the one that flooded North Carolina really badly. So it stayed at hurricane strength so far inland. Again, seasonal health concern that we're really familiar with is just, it's a monster we've seen many times in our lifetimes. We know about these things. They're just behaving differently from what they used to do due to climate change, and not in a good way. When you get fires in areas that also get a lot of rain, you get flash flooding in those areas because fires will bake the soil hard, and when it rains, if it's up on a mountain, when it rains, it creates flash floods that just go pouring down the mountain and into communities. So that's something that we have to watch out for too with regard to climate change. Again, let me just say it again real quick. Imagine forests drying out, more prone to wildfires. We get a wildfire. Then later in this, we get our regular rain season, and boom, we're getting flash floods because it takes a long time for places that have burned at really hot temperatures for that soil to loosen up again and so forth. So yeah, the flash flooding will happen. Another seasonal concern, we all know about toxic algae blooms. We've seen the signs that say, don't swim in the water, there's a toxic algae bloom. Sometimes local communities will say, don't walk near this body of water because we've got a toxic algae bloom. Here's a graphic that explains why climate change is making that worse. We've got our environmental conditions of more light, more heat, right? We still get that runoff from fertilizers and so forth going into our waterways. We get more hot days with climate change. Therefore, we get more toxic algae blooms. The algae likes to feed on whatever fertilizer and so forth is running off into that water. But they also like it warm. So that's what happens. And so we have to be super careful. Take care of your pets. Pay attention to the news. Again, these are things we've seen before. We're just might be seeing them more often than we used to as time moves on. So keep an eye out. The best we can do is just pay attention to the news, make sure we're informed so we know what to do to protect ourselves, including during flooding. Please, please, please be sure to turn around if you reach a road. I don't care how well you know that road. It is not worth your life to drive into it, even if it's just a foot deep. If the current is strong, that's all it takes to wipe your car, to sweep your car away into the floodwaters. So, to recap real quick, we have experienced these seasonal health concerns before. They're familiar to us, but climate change will make them arrive sooner, leave later, and or happen more frequently and or happen more intensely. And thanks for watching this. I hope you found it informative. Keep in mind that there are things you can do to protect yourself so that you are healthy.